is that he is a humble man. And we're so thankful that you came back to our district today, Bishop, and we're really looking forward to hearing what you have to say. Our bishop has given the message that we truly are partners, both laity and clergy, in ministry. I have seen that as he's gone about to transact business. He is very intentional about including laity, along with our clergy, in any plans or any business related to our conference. So, with that, Bishop, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Melba. I want to thank Gene Wisdom for hosting us. Gene, are you in the room, or did you just, there's in the back of the room? Gene, thank you. And thank the people from Wesley Greenville. So if the people from Wesley Greenville would stand, and let's show our appreciation for them. I need to tell you that I've been in the district many more times than that. But if I were to tell you why I was in the district, then I'd be violating some confidences. And so I want you to know that I get here more than you may think. So when we began to talk about the conference day with the bishop and the laity, I remember last year, and I thought to myself as I addressed the people at St. Andrews, and we had that time of conversation, there was some other things. I visited Linda Parks, and I said, I'm wondering if we can't do this differently. And that is that it seems every time we want people to travel to Plano, that's a long way for a lot of people. And when I begin to even think about the stewardship cost of that, it's easier. Now I know many of you still had to drive some distance to get here, but most of you would have never come to Plano, and I know that. And it's a lot easier for me to come from Plano into the districts than it is to send, lots of people to drive. So today we saved a lot of money collectively. And I'm always about being a wise steward of resources. That doesn't mean I'm cheap. I'm going to be clear about that. But I believe in being a wise steward, and I think that's really important in terms as we move forward. I don't think I'm going to need this. If I do, I'll reach back and get it. I'm glad Linda Parks and Henry Lesner are here. Linda was able to be with us last weekend, and because of an unexpected sort of health, but she's fine, and I just wanted to, I'm not going to violate any HIPAA laws, that's for you to share, but everything's fine. So that's a word to your clergy. Never tell somebody what somebody's got. It's not your. So it's sort of like when I do prayers, somebody said, well, what was wrong with so-and-so? So that I can pray for them. I said, well, go ahead and pray for them. And they said, well, how will I know what to ask God for? And I said, well, you're not informing God. Think about this for a second. Like God didn't know that. Prayer's not about our informing God about what's going on in the world. It's about us lifting it up to God. So anyway, so Linda, you may share that. And Henry sort of pinch hit, he pinch hit it last weekend. And so Henry, thank you for doing that as well. So I want to have this a one-way conversation in the beginning, but actually it's a two-way conversation. I remember that one of my favorite professors at Perkins said that actually a lecture is the most democratic form of communication, because while I speak, you can do whatever you want. You can check in and check out. You begin to sort of reframe what I'm talking about in a way that makes sense for you. And at a point later, you'll have the opportunity to, ask a question, and I'm going to gather those, and I'll answer several questions at once, because many of them will be the same, about the same topic. And so it's the best way to do this and sort of begin to address. One of the things I want to say to you is that I love my job. I love what I do. I love it because I have more hope about the United Methodist Church and the North Texas Conference, especially, than I did 3 years ago. And from the moment I became a candidate for the episcopacy and began to travel around our jurisdiction, I began to witness and sense about the varied ministries that are happening in local churches. But there's some things I miss. I miss being the pastor of a local church, and I need to admit that. Now, I can tell you there are a couple of things I don't miss. And maybe these are some things that I could or should share with you, won't, but I would imagine there are things that your pastor may wish they didn't have to do. But I'll tell you what I miss. In some respects, I miss the rhythm of the week. Because the rhythm of the week was always designed about preaching on Sunday morning. And the week before that, being very clear about the congregation, the mission field, the biblical text, and allowing myself to be used in a way, not necessarily to feed people, but to help people grow. Secondly, I miss the rhythm of the week in this way. Since the moment I was an intern at the First Young Methodist Church in Fort Worth, I visited the hospitals every Wednesday of the week. My week was designed around Wednesday as a hospital day. And I was the pastor on a church, and it was just me and the secretary. There were more days than that, but for a period of over 30 years, every Wednesday was hospital day. And I have to admit that I miss that. And I miss it because I think it's a way in which pastors become better preachers, as they get connected with people in difficult and challenging times. I miss baptizing babies. I miss lots of things. But I've gotten to do and witness some significant things that I would have never been able to do had I still been the pastor of church. And all those, most of them, I should say, what brings me great hope. We get to think about, we've done some work together, leadership at the annual conference, and by that I mean the district superintendents, the center directors, Linda Parks, our lay leader, about what really drives us. And I think I framed it in this way, and when we framed it together, I just sort of set it off the cuff until people began to draw back to it, and I've encouraged people to not adopt the mantra, whatever you think, whatever you want to do, whatever you say. It's not the way I like to be in leadership. I never think I'm the smartest guy in the room. I just hope that I'm smart enough to get the smartest people in the room at the right time. But this is where we are. We truly believe that God wants to introduce us to people whom we do not know and who do not have a relationship with our God in Christ. And that's a real transition when you get to think about a local church. Because we can get into a place where we think it is about us. In the very beginnings of that Christian movement, the Way, as it was initially called, it was never about the disciples. It was about meeting people on behalf of Jesus. Which is why he modeled it early on when he sent them out 2 by 2 with very little to carry. Because he knew that this movement was going to be a missionary movement. When I was the pastor at the First Young Methodist Church in Hurst, it became obvious to me, now, believe it or not, did y'all know that we lived in the Bible Belt? Let me share with you that everybody self-identifies, or not everybody, many people self-identify as Christian. The truth of the matter is most people even the Bible Belt don't have a faith community or a faith home. So a number of years ago, I was chairing the Access Committee for the John Peters Health System in Tarrant County about access to health care. And I learned from the medical community that in order for a person to be well, then that person needed to have a medical home. Then it immediately began to trigger something in my own mind, and that is, for any human being I believe to be truly whole, then they need a faith community. And so it seems to me that what we really need to realize then, our mission, while our ministry may be about us in some ways, and I'm not saying that we should forget anybody within the pews, we've got to remember that on any given Sunday, most people in your communities are either reading the newspaper working, sleeping in, whatever else people may do on Sunday morning, I'm not sure. But they don't have a faith home. And that's really the challenge, I think, for United Methodism. And see, the beauty of who we are is that is the way in which we had our very humble beginnings. Our humble beginnings because it was a man named John Wesley and others who went to places where the church was not and began to meet people where they were, meet people whom they did not know, and introduce those people to this God whom we serve. When you begin to think about Methodism, the Sunday school really had its beginnings from a Methodist lay preacher, because he believed that children who worked in coal mines or the children of miners should learn how to read. And so Sunday school was about not only teaching the values of faith, but teaching literacy. So you begin to see how Methodism started really talking about the culture, the community, and they were very clear about why they did those things. They did them because they did it in the name of the Christ to connect this Lord with people's basic human needs. We do that, except we sometimes shy away from being very clear about why we do that. And that's what I want to talk about briefly with you today. So at the end of last year, we had engaged earlier in the fall the General Board of Pensions and Health Benefits to do a fact analysis, which is a financial accountability consulting team. I never can remember. There are too many acronyms in the Methodist Church, and I can't keep them straight. And Linda Parks was on that team. I think Melba, you were on the team. Pete Adrian was on the team. And there may be some other people here who were on the team. And also, the General Counsel of Finance Administration, the General Board of Discipleship had roles to play in it. And when I began to invite people to be on the team, they thought that we were talking about just a financial analysis of our annual conference. And I said, and in fact, the General Board of Pensions was sort of curious about why I wanted to do it. And I said, well, I want us to move from strength to greater strength. Because we really have some gaps in terms of our mission field that I sense are happening, but I think if we really know what they are, then we can coalesce around them more quickly. So this is where we do the slides, and so I don't do technology well, and so I want to say thank you. So this means that anything that goes wrong from here on out, the slides, is not my fault. Okay, can you see this? So I just made a mistake. This is why I told you I didn't do this well. Well, I still did. I'll get it. Gene, don't worry. Oh, I really have messed this up. I've got it. Okay, is that better? Oh, let me have that. That'll be, thank you. Okay, whoa! Hey, when I was at Lover's Lane at Metro District, you know, they had this too much cool stuff that I really couldn't understand. And they had this music, and I felt like, I was the lead singer for The Who for a minute. Anyway, so this is where we are. So this is the North Texas Conference. This is us compared with all the other annual conferences in the United States. So I want you to look at this. So let's look at average attendance per church. Our ranking is number 2. And then if you look at average membership per church, our ranking is 2. If you look at average spending per church, we're 1. That means if we take the average of all the churches in the country and we compare them with the average of the North Texas Conference, our churches spend on average more than any other conference our churches do. Does that make sense? And the average spent by all of our churches are $474,038. Now, some of your churches in the East District will spend that, many will not. But in a moment, you're going to see something that drives that. So attendance and membership per church is very high compared to the rest of the country. If you see the other things related to the average debt per church, we also do that well. Because the average debt of each of our churches is over $500,000. And that is #1 in the country. Now we need to remember that we live, a part of our conference, or a large part in terms of the population, is centered in the 4th largest media market in the country. And it continues to grow rapidly. That every time I move north through Collin County or Denton County, I see more and more houses than I did 2 weeks before. So I've lived in the Metroplex my whole life. Fort Worth, and then now Plano. And so what's happened in the years that I've been here is astronomical. And it's not going to let up. So the debt is just the continual building of new churches to meet needs. The last one is this person served in community ministries. We rank number 11. So I was in Sulphur Springs a year ago last January, and I'd heard about a mission there, and I was there to meet with different groups. And so I told Joan Gray LaBar, who was the district superintendent then, if I'm going to come to Sulphur Springs and do this, why don't we do it on a day in which I can be at the dinner bell? And the dinner bell is a feeding ministry on Wednesday, I believe, at noon. And so I still have an apron and a cap from the dinner bell, so that when I'm grilling outside, sometimes I put my dinner bell cap on and my apron. But it was amazing. I watched the members of the First United Methodist Church at Sulphur Springs interact with persons who came for a free meal. That's a community ministry. How many of you have an AA group in your church? You may or may not. A few of you. That's a community ministry. How many of you have a food pantry in your church? That's a community ministry. How many of you have an after-school? That's a community ministry. I'm well aware of what the Church of Mount Vernon does in terms of feeding children in the summer who have no other way of having a meal. That's a community ministry. And so when you think there are almost 60 annual conferences, so we rank in the top 20%. That's a good way to look at it, easily, about people served in community ministries of church. Now, it may be better than that, but these are the figures that the laity and clergy of our annual conference report. Let's go to the next slide. Now, this has got a lot of stuff, so I just want to talk about a couple of things here. The first one's the most important thing to me. That's called, that's a ranking of attendees versus profession of faith. And as healthy as we may think we are, this is where we are less than stellar. If you think there are 59 annual conference, Vic, is that right? Somewhere around, Mary Brooke, do you know? Is that right? Is that right? We're going to call it that right until somebody else looks it up today. Anyway, so if there are 59 annual conferences, that means that 52 of them are doing better than we are in terms of the numbers of persons who come to our churches on professions of faith as compared to our average worship attendance. What that means is, although our average worship attendance ranks number 1, together, and I mean together, we are not doing well, or there's something we're not doing right about speaking about the gospel, telling the story of Jesus, inviting people to our congregations, recommending how our churches could help them. So Jim Osier, who's the Center Director for New Church Development and Congregational Transformation, talks about the best way to talk about this is not inviting people, but recommending someone. For example, if you, let's say you're at work, and one of your co-workers has a family member who dies. And you know that he or she has no faith home. It's one thing to send a card and say, I'm thinking about you. But what would it be like if your church may have a grief ministry or a way in which they help people undergoing grief, or you may simply say, I would like for you, I want you to come to my church with me. I think you will discover that you can get more support there than you could ever imagine. You see, life happens and there are ways in which we can connect with people. Or in any number of ways. And I think this is something we've got to work on. Because when United Methodists talk about what they will do in terms of telling the story of Jesus, we're better at saying what we won't do or are uncomfortable doing than claiming what we are comfortable in doing. Like, most of us are not going to hand tracts out. And I need to tell you that this is something we work really hard on at First United Methodist Church at Hurst. I never felt like we could find our rhythm or get on our feet, except that they did after I left. And it's something that we've begun the process of and the groundwork on, and that it has, I think, been very helpful. And it's not like a congregation in a built-out suburb that is aging and very different and transitioning has a lot of people around it. I mean, the people can normally come to that church. I mean, most churches grow really because new people move in. But it's the way in which they really, I think, found a place being a Mount Museum that it has started growing in some unique ways again. Let's go to the next slide. This is other debt and things like that, and all of our secured debt is ranked number 1. And when I've talked about we saved a lot of money today, debt is one of those things that is a necessary in terms of growth at times or in terms of redoing some things, but I always get a little nervous about debt. And the reason, as long as interest rates stay low, that it's okay, but then when they start climbing, then it begins to take money away from ministry. And so this is something that we're going to be working on as an annual conference with some of our churches. Let's go to the next piece. Okay, so we have about 300 churches. If you add those numbers up, they'll come close to that. It'll be the easiest way to talk about it. So over half of our churches, 174 of the almost 300, have worship attendance of less than 99. 99 or less on a Sunday morning. Okay? Now, to actually support a full-time United Methodist clergy who is an elder, which means they've been ordained, then the cost of that is $70,000 or $75,000. That's minimal salary, is the minimum. That is health insurance, and that is a pension plan. And if you see that that roughly over 200 of our churches, and those are basic numbers. We've learned that some churches can do that, and while others can't, that over 200 of our churches are simply unable to do that. Which means that the delivery of clergy, of ministry by ordained clergy is very expensive. I mean, it is expensive. It's expensive to form persons with a theological education, and it's expensive in terms of the salary and the benefits package. Which means we know what's going to happen in the coming years. That we will provide more and more full-time local pastors who are formed in our course of study school, or we will also utilize more part-time local pastors. And that does not mean that's bad. That means it could be better. In this way, one of the delights of doing what I do now is hearing the stories of rejuvenation and excitement that are happening in some of our churches in which they are served by a part-time local pastor. I'm well aware of a church in this district whose average worship attendance is about 200 with a part-time local pastor. And it becomes the way in which we meet the mission field and serve that local church with a pastor. Ordination does not mean better. It doesn't mean it's bad either. I want to be clear about that. But just simply the cost and where we are and the cost of forming people does not mean that that's always the best way to go. So we have actually had this conversation this past week, a group of us, about the many forms in which ministry can take place. And getting our heads around it is very difficult. Ordained elders, ordained deacons, full-time local pastors, part-time local pastors, lay servants, and certified lay ministers. Problem is getting all of those pieces to work together and helping people, laity and clergy, understand that that ministry can happen from any of those places, but ministry really basically happens from you. Not from us, but from you. Because more ministry is delivered to the mission field by laity than by anyone who's getting paid. When you think of Sunday school classes that are taught, choirs that are sung in, and ushers, and Stephen ministers, and driving people to the doctors, and taking meals when there's grief, I mean, most ministries happen. And in fact, I would imagine that 90% of the invitations to a local congregation happen because of laity, which then serves this point. Our churches cannot thrive. Our churches cannot reach the mission field without you. You. On a number of occasions I've said, I want you to imagine, this is to a gathering of clergy, that the church in which you're appointed is the only church you will ever pastor. You're here until you retire. So if you have a conflict, work it out. I have to do that in my family. If you're not doing something well, then listen and learn to do it better. If you can't do that piece well, is there someone who can be helpful in terms of ministry? Likewise, imagine that the pastor you have is the only pastor you will ever have until he or she retires. I said that in one group of laity and they started laughing and groaning. Now, it wasn't a large part, but what I want to say is let's face it. Think about this. We're in this covenant together, and one thing that happens in the appointive system is that people think that there's a conflict. Well, we know how to take care of this conflict. Let's call the district superintendent and then call the bishop, and then all of a sudden we can get this person moved immediately. Y'all, it doesn't work like that. Because every time we do that, we just never get you the best person available. Which is why I dislike making appointments until the annual conference. It's just easier. So, now look, that's a goal. That's not a reality. It's not going to be a reality. We know that. But it's a way of saying, and I've said to our clergy, hey, I've done that in my marriage, and so have you, but we thought about the wrong things in the church. And so I think there's always a way in which we can move forward. So that's a piece about that. Let's go to so you see, look, a couple of other things here, and in terms of this church attendance piece, so that this is a little different after 2013 because we have a couple of churches that broke the 1,000 barrier. So we have 13 churches that worship 1,000 or more, and then roughly almost 30 of our churches, 10%, worship 500 persons or more. This just gives you where we are. By the way, none of those denotes what is best or better. Okay? This is not a value. This is not an evaluation. This is a descriptive slide. Go to the next one. Please. Nope, back. I'm sorry. My fault. So tomorrow, when the United Methodists in North Texas gather and we Zoom, it's an average Sunday, whatever an average Sunday is. Of the 4 churches worshiping over 2,000, those 4 churches, 10,000, over 10,000 people will be worshiping those 4 congregations. One of them, people can name 3 of them pretty quickly. They can name Highland Park in Dallas, First Church Richardson, and Christ Church Plano. It's the 4th one no one gets. Clergy may not answer this. Can you name the 4th church, other church that worships over 2,000?
First UMC Dallas.
No. No, not St. Andrews. The Korean church is exactly right in Irving. Central Korean. Over 2,000. Now, I haven't been to Korea. I've talked with the pastor a couple, 3 times in the last few weeks. I've not been there to worship. But if you go, it's always lunchtime afterwards, you know. I've been to a couple of our Korean churches and they serve lunch to everybody after the worship service. But that's, which says to us that we have a number of Korean churches, some of which are thriving, some of which may be struggling because of an immigration issue. But we know that the Koreans moving into the Dallas, Collin County, Denton County are a mission field for North Texas. Okay? So that's by size. And again, just to let you know, but I wanted to talk about the Korean church just because I find it very fascinating. And they do grow larger churches. It's just in the DNA to grow larger churches. Well, in the Hispanic community, their churches are smaller, and there are more of them. And so we find ways in which to reach a larger number of Hispanics than Koreans, knowing that for the most part, we're talking about congregations that are going to move from 50 to 200, 250. And that could change, but right now that looks the way it's going to be. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So when we did this, then there were some dilemmas that we discovered and that we decided that we would work on. And these are what they are. The first thing is a conference strategic plan. How many of you are lay members of annual conference? How many of you were there when you adopted the last strategic plan a few years ago? Several of you. Which, as I said, every annual conference in the country has done a strategic plan that was really a restructuring plan. You know, let's cut down the number of districts, let's do this, let's do that. And I sat through one in Central Texas, and I've been very clear. This wasn't a strategic plan, this is a reorganization plan. That's not to say it was the wrong thing to do, but restructuring is not something I'm really interested in doing. So we talked about a strategic plan that was crisp and clear, and that focused on 3 or 4 initiatives, and that really had a strategy about it, which meant that it was different from anything most of us do, because we've all sat on long-range plans, planning committees in churches, and all of a sudden you realize we are talking about the color of the paint in the parlor in the strategic plan. And that's not a strategy, that's not strategy. I don't even know if it's a tactic. But that being said, well, it is a tactic for discord sometimes, I want to say that. But so we're talking about a strategic plan that it's about our mission field and about sustainability of our churches and how we provide the resources to local churches of any size in order to thrive. And I'll talk about that in a minute. The second thing is in North Texas United Methodist identity. When I talk to pastors around the conference and laity as well, look, I've been a pastor my whole life, so I know what it's like to do this. Every once in a while you're in a church and you realize, I don't think that some people understand that we're United Methodist. And I'm not talking about appointment. I'm just talking about some basic theological ground rules. And it's about the way we talk and the way we live grace. It's the way in which we talk about the will of God, human responsibility, human freedom, and that things aren't destined. Which is to say, and the way in which we all heard this more than anything is the way in which we talk with people who've experienced a death, a tragedy. because God didn't will that tragedy. It wasn't in God's plan. God's will and God's plan is how do we make, not even how we make sense, but how do we move through. So, but it's not just that. We want to talk about our Christian identity as United Methodist, because we believe that everyone is born with free will. It's not destined that they have or not have a relationship. God doesn't decide that. We decide that. And those are important pieces. So that's the piece about the United Methodist identity. Let me give you an example. I've said this in the spring of 2012. I was shocked to see, after several tornadoes had ripped through the Midwest and other parts of our country, that a leading voice and for some people in Christian circles said that the tornadoes were God's judgment on us. Look, God's not out killing people in order to make a point. God made God's point when God's people went to start digging through rubble. God made God's point when people gave up weeks to go rebuild communities. God made God's point when people held each other's hands in grief. Everybody, you hear what I'm saying? This becomes important. We've got to watch how we talk about our God. Because if we're going to reach the mission field, people who are saying no or not interested in the Christian faith, they're saying no, and their lack of interest is because I firmly believe, and know because of the sociological data that we're now gathering in terms of religion in America, is they are saying no to a God you and I don't believe in. They want to say yes to the God that you and I talk about in the Methodist Church. And frankly, we've got the stuff theologically, but we're not delivering it well enough. So this is about our identity. The third piece is about local church outreach and mission. We believe that there's not a church in the North Texas Conference, no matter its size, that doesn't want to do a better job in terms of outreach and mission in its local communities. I'm real clear. I was so wedded to the community in which the church I served was located that we were always looking around what's happening in the city of Hurst or in the HEB area that we really can make a difference in. And people get blinded about what's really happening. So several years ago, we discovered that in all of Tarrant County, that the zip code, there are two zip codes in Hurst, the zip code in which Hurst was located, 76053, had the highest infant mortality rate of any zip code in Tarrant County. Well, that just sent some people in the church over the edge. They just, what's wrong? Something's wrong with the data. That couldn't possibly be true. Well, it was true. And so then it became a way in which for us to say, okay, let's marshal the resources we have in terms of how to address this problem. We did it through one of our missions, and I won't go into that. But what I'm saying is we believe that we can help churches connect with each other to do even greater things in the communities in which they serve. And so we want to find ways in which we can help make that happen in some significant ways, or can even begin to help churches dream a little differently about mission. We think this is really important as we move forward. I was at last night, our Board of Churches Society for the North Texas Conference had a film called A Place at the Table, and it's about hunger in America. And there was a point at which people forget this. Towards the end of the 1960s, the beginning of the 70s, hunger was almost gone in this country through the use of different things. Now, 1 in 6 Americans suffer from hunger. 50 million people. Here's the interesting thing. When hunger was almost gone, there were only 200 food banks and food pantries. Do you know how many there are now? 40,000. More food banks and food pantries, and the hunger need is greater. That doesn't make sense, does it? So, it's not saying, don't close your food pantry, don't quit feeding people, but what is something that a group of congregations in the county could do to sort of, hey, how could we really address this and find a way to do this a little differently? So that's a piece. The fourth thing is the church demographics and culture, and I talked about the Korean population and Hispanic population. And Henry Lessner and I, hey, thanks for the email. I haven't answered you back. I'm so bad about answering email. In fact, I'm just horrible. Look, I can't keyboard, you know. I do it with 2 fingers. How many of you do it with 2 fingers? Oh, Henry, you're better at email than I am, though. I need to get a little tutoring section. But the point of the matter is that I said last week at this time, and Henry Lessner came up to me and sent me an email about somebody about, we have a growing Pakistani population in northern Dallas County. We have a Vietnamese congregation. We have a Cambodian congregation with which I've spent some time last year, beginning about at Lake Spring. And what I'm saying is that we just don't know how diverse some of our communities can be. And so the number, we're trying to find ways in which we can deal with the culture and the demographics for the Hispanic population, and it's all over North Texas. And so there's not a week that goes by that one of our churches doesn't say, we want to start a Hispanic ministry. Well, when we do that, we want to do that well. It's sort of like a restaurant. If it fails in if a location fails, and another moves in, it's going to fail again, and another moves in, it's going to fail again. So we believe, or I believe, that we get one chance to do this right with optimum possibilities. So we've got to do it well all the time. And which means, it doesn't mean I'm afraid of failure. It means that if we do a Hispanic ministry in a particular church and it continues to fail, we know we need to move churches in terms of doing that. But this is an interesting piece because they don't get large quickly, and it's difficult to know how to do this, but we're working significantly on this. The next 2 things have to do with debt loads. One's debt loads of clergy. So we're doing this study right now that's involving with a funding plan that we're going to bring to the annual conference, we hope, about debt load, seminary education debt. Now, at annual conference, a couple of motions were made about that, and I must tell you that anecdotally, I have some questions about how deep this debt load is as it relates to theological education. I'm not saying there's not any. When I was a pastor of First Church Hurst, I had 5. At one point, I looked up, and I was the only full-time clergy person, and everybody else was in school. Judith may remember this. I mean, everybody was in school, and at Perkins. And I'm thinking, well, this wasn't very smart of me to be the only full-time clergy person, but we were able to make it happen. I think we were better then, to be honest, when everybody was in school. That's because when you get more focused, you just do better. But that being said, none of them graduated with any debt. So we've been looking at it, and as we talk to our younger clergy, none of them have any debt. Their debt is not about seminary education. It may be undergraduate debt. But we're talking about basically seminary debt, theological training debt. And what we're discovering is a lot of people are putting on the debt load is about not choosing to change one's lifestyle or standard of living while one is in theological training. Now look, friends, you might as well train it then, because it's going to be a great rude awakening, the first appointment of the most. But anyway, so we're working about how do we deal with that, because we want to be fair, we want to do this well, but we're clear that we're emerging with this idea that what the conference will seek to address is debt load as it for tuition, fees, and books. So, but this is an issue for some of our clergy, and we're working on that, and we must address that. The second thing is just debt loads at churches, and this is some of our larger churches, and while much of that may be under control, we have had some serious hiccups, not with larger churches, but other churches, about debt loads, and we're looking at how to tighten that up so we don't get somebody in trouble. And we're dealing with a couple of those right now, and and they're very troubling. The next thing is the clergy training, strategic planning, and fundraising, and this also has to do with congregations. We have a group of people who are willing to help congregations learn how to budget and do some things financially. And we believe we have significant people resources to help congregations who may be struggling with how they budget or how they deploy resources, that we know that we've got people who can be helpful about that. And then the last thing is clergy effectiveness. So let's talk turkey here. We all have ranges of effectiveness in terms of our jobs in life. And our clergy have ranges of effectiveness. And that's no surprise to you. And we discovered that some clergy are more effective in some places than they are other places. That, you know, they just thrive in better places than other places. And we've discovered that some clergy don't thrive anywhere. That's a fact. And I've said this. I mean, I've been open with them. So we are looking at clergy effectiveness in terms of what we expect of clergy. But I want you to know that you are our partners in this. And the reason I say that is because how many of you are on the Staff Parish Relations Committee right now, or Pastor Parish Relations Committee? Raise your hand. How many of you have been on one before? Raise your hand. So let's see everybody who's been on one or is on one right now. Raise your hand. The evaluation forms sometimes are challenging. You know, if we were to have a survey about what to do with an evaluation form, we get about 3,000 answers. So we are working on that. I'm not saying that will change, but what we're working on is in terms of what we expect effectiveness to look like in broad general forms from our clergy. With that, though, is this is where I really need you. I need your help. I need you to fill out the forms. I need you to be honest with your clergy, but I need you to be affirming of the same thing. So when I talk about accountability, most people think we're talking about things that people aren't doing well. Accountability is also about affirming people when they're doing well. Does that make sense? Some of our SPR committees, for example, it's accountability time or evaluation time. Let's look at every shortcoming that our pastor has. Well, I want to tell you, that is really motivating for a pastor. It doesn't motivate your children, and it doesn't motivate your pastor, and it didn't motivate you on your job. There are those things you need to deal with. Be honest about them. Open with them. Do it in the way in which, you know, use the golden rule here. Do it in the way in which you like it done with you. But it's important to be honest, because this is the way in which this happens for us sometimes. And by the way, this has not happened in this district, so this is just so I don't have any church in mind on this. You're off the hook. I just don't want you to get on the hook about this one. So the Staff Parish Relations Committee will say to the DS, this pastor has got to go. So we'll have the conversation with the pastor. The pastor will then talk to people in the SPR committee. Oh, it's not that bad. We think you can stay another couple of years. When they've been telling us they can't stay. So we all need to say the same thing. And we're willing to be your partner, but it makes it very difficult. I'm not talking to you. I mean, this is just this generic speech I've got everywhere. We're willing to be the partner, but we've got to have, I guess what I'm saying is, thank you for your ministry, but I'm holding you accountable about this. We've got to take seriously the evaluation, because this is the way in which we help our pastors grow. This is the way you help your pastor grow. It's not the time in which to try and scuttle them or move them. It's the time in which you really do the evaluation. And I think what's coming is the evaluation is going to be moved at a different time from the time of the year in which we ask you for whether your pastor can remain, move, or those kinds of things. We're not going to I think we should do those things differently at different times. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And I think that's a healthier way to be. Look, I've been a pastor for 35 years. I've sat through those things with SPR committees. I know what that's like. I know what it's like for somebody who really loves me to say something difficult. But you know what? Thank you for the person's honesty, because that was never an issue again. Does that help? So, but this effectiveness thing, we're rolling out, I hope, at annual conference. The team's been working on it significantly, and that's an important piece. The last thing is the utilization of conference resources challenges of medium-sized churches, and I would say the smaller churches as well. So people say, how can the conference help our church? Well, first of all, I need to tell you that the annual conference is not a bank. We don't keep a lot of money lying around. Because if we kept a lot of money lying around, it means that we were apportioning too much money to you. So we are wise stewards of money. Do we make mistakes? Yes. But my wife made me keep a suit that I never would wear and try to put out for the Goodwill for about 5 years to remind me that don't buy everything you think you're going to like. You know, I've made some mistakes, and churches make them. We know that. But what I want to say on this issue is how do we help? One of the questions is going to be in a few minutes. How can we help your church? So there are two ways in which we do that currently. That's just a part of the system that we're using. It's called Healthy Church Initiative. Are any of your congregations using Healthy Church Initiative currently? So we've just begun. We don't know where that's going to lead us, but that's what we're using. And it is not akin to some system that was used a few years ago, because one of the confusing things about an annual conference is oh, this isn't working, let's don't try it long enough, so let's try a new one. So every new thing we try then is suspect. So we're gonna do this at the time, and the other is called Small Church Initiative. Pastors get coaches, congregations, laity get a mentor, and somebody meet with them, and it becomes a way in which we really identify ways in which a congregation can can transition to some greater strength and effectiveness. So that's a part of that. Let me go to the three other things here before we break here for a few moments. That's all I need of the slides, I think. Let me say this. There's a couple other things that we became aware of last year during the annual conference appointment season. And your district superintendent at the time, Joan Gray-LeVar, helped us identify this in some very good ways. And that's regarding the appointment of women to our congregations. There are many of us who thought, I didn't, but there are many people who had come to think that this was not an issue anymore. Well, the truth is, sometimes it's a bigger issue than it was 20 years ago. And what Joan helped us understand is that we don't prepare congregations in the manner in which we need to be accepting of a woman clergy person. Now, I want to be clear, this is settled business for the United Methodist Church. This is settled business. This is who we are. This is how we live it out. And what I want to tell you is that we have many, many effective women clergy. And when a congregation says no to a woman, they may be saying no to a very effective person. Which sometimes means that some people prefer a mediocre man to a wonderful woman. Look, you can pull out a little piece from the Bible, we'll do this, do that, but I want to be clear. Women in ministry in North Texas do effective stuff. And I've got three congregations, I know one in particular that said, Bishop, whatever you do, do not send us a man. The last two we've had have been disastrous. But if a woman ever fails, and seriously, it gets marked and they blame its fact that she's a woman. Those days are coming to an end. And what we want to do is we want to help congregations live into what it means to fully embrace the gifts and graces for ministry that people have regardless of gender. So this is non-negotiable. We know there have been some things, and we know that means that we will continually work, but we will be working with SBR committees, with our male clergy, who at times have been less than helpful. And in fact, there are a number of times I've had to call male clergy after I get home after listening to them Sunday morning and say to them, let's talk about your sermon. Let's talk about that you really don't make jokes or say things that really cause one to doubt the effectiveness of a woman, whether she is your wife, the mother of your children, a co-worker, somebody you work for. Does that make sense? And believe it or not, people don't like getting those phone calls. You don't want to be on the receiving end of one of those phone calls because I'm very clear and very slow and deliberate. And the reason why is because I have two daughters who, even in today's world, in corporate and nonprofit America, they work one working one the other, knows how difficult it is. And we're talking people who work in Dallas and LA. And frankly, my daughters are smarter than most men. Many of our daughters are. And this comes up to our identity as well. We actually have churches. I mean, there are churches of other denominations. And I tell people, if your daughter couldn't be the pastor, is that the message you want to say about the fullness of the gospel? So anyway, so we're working on that, and we've actually had some very good work done. And I'm excited about the possibilities and what's happening. We are doing the clergy effectiveness, and I've talked about that already. There's a task force working on that. I think this about a couple other quick things. We are engaged in a mission project, and we're trying to get away from the use of the word project. Last year at the annual conference, the Center for Missional Outreach introduced, and it was affirmed by the annual conference, to undertake a generational mission plan to wipe out extreme asset-based poverty in 2 zip codes. Now, this was not my plan. I mean, I didn't come in with this to do. And when I first heard about it, I thought to myself, this is crazy. This can't, I mean, I just imagine, this is just, I'm going, how is this going to happen? And then I began to think. I really began to pray about this because I didn't want to say that out loud and sort of quash something. But I thought, if it isn't bold enough, it will not capture the hearts and minds of people. That what happens in the church and in the annual conference. So one of my colleagues, for example, who will be the conference preacher this year, she challenged that 100 churches in the Northern Illinois Annual Conference will offer Spanish-speaking or ESL classes, or Spanish-speaking classes for clergy and laypersons. And one of her staff members says, how am I going to get that done? She goes, well, I don't expect you to get it done, I expect to do it. What happened is over 100 churches, just needed 100, decided that she was talking to them. So the deal about the zip code is one of the zip codes is in this district. It's in Red River County, 75426, the third poorest county in the state of Texas. Now we can let that lie and do nothing, or we can decide that as a people who've been called by God to do something significant, that we're going to do both things. So already, a conference staff person who works part-time, who gets paid part-time, works full-time, has begun to gather partners and begin to work in Red River County. And soon I'll be going out there to meet with people as well. And we're also doing a zip code in Dallas County. And I don't want to talk about that, I want to talk about this one. I think that some of us know how to marshal resources and deal with systems in an urban area better than we know how to do it in a rural area. And this is going to be a big challenge, which means this is where we need you. Because we know that you know things we don't know. We know you know how to make things happen that we don't know how to make happen. This is why it's a conference-wide project and not the project, just something that the Annual Conference Mission Center will be doing. It's all of us. Now, why are we doing it? Well, one of the 4 focus areas in the United Methodist Church is ministry to the poor. We want to be clear that ministry to the poor means that we walk alongside, that we also help people find the fullness of what it means to be a child of God, a child of, and have available to him or her the transformation that we've all had in our own lives, but that God is still working on us. It's also the way in which we finally say we recover our roots. I talked about this earlier, that we recover our roots in terms of what Wesley began to do, which was really recovery of the early church. Now, you got to remember that Carthage at one point, with the plague coming, everybody left the city except for the Christians who remained to care for the ones who were dying. So we need to recover who we are. And frankly, when we do that, that is the best invitation for a person who doesn't have a faith home to think about, wow, they're not just building buildings and looking inward, they're looking outward. And so it's really a way in which we can help a child who lives in poverty see that that is not necessarily a dead end for her. It's the way in which we help a young man realize that, I can destroy my life with meth, or I can seek an alternative future. And frankly, we've used all kinds of things in this country to deal with issues related to children. Why don't we use the gospel? Bold, novel idea. So as we begin to move into Red River County, I covet your prayers, and as you will learn of ways in which you can be helpful. The General Board of Global Ministries, as I began to talk about this with my colleagues and different people around the church, more people are interested in this idea than I thought they'd be. And the reason why they like it is because it's significantly focused in a particular geographical area. And so it's a way in which we can really work and see what works and use it as a lab. And so the General Board of Global Ministries, it looks as if, I think, because they've sent people down there first interview, we'll pay over half the salary, we'll pay some of the salary and housing costs. We're going to have 2 community workers on the ground in North Texas, one in Dallas and one in Red River County, who will literally be a community neighborhood worker and really work the ground. In addition, I discovered that Perkins is going to provide a Perkins intern to the zip code in Dallas to work on it. So we even have clergy now who are wanting to get appointed to a church that's really got some difficulty in the zip code in Dallas. So we don't know we're going to be successful. It's not going to be overnight, but monumental change happens with incremental steps. And I only ask that you pray for this and you begin to think about ways in which when we begin to talk about involvement, that you'll say, I believe we can do this. And this is a way in which we can connect our work together. So that's a piece. Last thing, and then we're going to break and take some, then I'll have you time for some questions and those kinds of things, is March 5th, this Wednesday, is Ash Wednesday. So get your partying in, whatever you do. I mean, it's amazing how important Shrove Tuesday has become to people. But Ash Wednesday is the beginning of Lent, 40 days. So if you go home and get on your computer, you can pull up, how many of you get emails or the videos that we send out to the conference? If you want to do that, get on the website, register, give your email address. How many of you get the newspaper? So there are ways in which you can subscribe to the newspaper, and you can do that in the back of the room, right? So you can do that, but it's a way in which you can learn about things. But I'd encourage you to get on the website and find a way in which you can get the emails that we send out with videos that I'm challenging people with. This one is on my page on the website, and actually it's about Lent. And so like last year, I gave up 1 meal a week. I need to give up more than that. And I gave up 1 meal a week. And in that, then I contributed, donated the money to a ministry in the North Texas Conference that was seeking to alleviate hunger. And I don't know if you were there. If those of you who were there may remember that actually it was I gave it to the Royce City Church, and because they are the only ones who asked for it. I mean, I'm giving money away. If I announce I'm giving money away, you would think people would be asking for a gift. One church asked for it, I gave it to them. So, but this year I'm inviting Methodists all over the conference to do the same thing. And you can get on the website and figure out how. It's been emailed to your church's pastors and how they've dealt with it. And their particular churches is I don't know. But this I will say. Then we're going to use and collect the money for the zip code projects to be used in Red River County and in Dallas County. And we hope that the zip code project becomes, spreads across the conference in a couple of other areas as well. So anyway, you can find that out. We're challenging. I don't know that we'll get there, but maybe we will. And I ask you to join me in just giving a meal, one meal a week, using that time of fasting to pray for the churches, the conference, your particular church, ministers, clergy, laity, everybody, and about the zip code project. Then make a gift to the zip code project. That'd be helpful. So this is question time. This is the way we're going to do questions. There are cards on your table. Melba, you just want me to give you the answer. There are cards on your table. We're going to take about a 5-10 minute break. We're going to gather the cards. The associate lay leaders, raise your hand and find ways. And I've got to go through them because I'm going to group them together because it's just easier than just taking them one by one by one. And I'm always looking, I'll group some of them together because they'll be similar. And then we'll work on that. So let's take, I've got 15 till 11. And we're going to gather at 5 minutes to 11. So I'll give you 10 minutes and they'll get you cards and, if you need to go to one of the necessary rooms.